want to tell you about a morning I had in London. I was at one of my favorite coffee shops near my office at the time, a coffee shop that I went to almost every single day. And I was ordering what I genuinely believed was the healthiest possible version of my morning coffee. No sugar in the cup, I'd already given that up. No flavored syrup, I'd given that up too. Although an almond mocha had been genuinely one of my great daily pleasures for years. No full fat milk. I was doing almond milk because I'd read it was the better choice, the lighter choice, the healthier choice. As far as I was concerned, ordering that coffee that morning in London, I had made every virtuous decision a person can make about a cup of coffee. And then, one day, I happened to glance at the carton of milk that the barista was pouring from. And I saw it right there in the ingredient list. Sugar. Not a tiny amount. Certainly more than I would have chosen to put in the coffee myself, even back when I was putting sugar in my morning coffee. And the annoying thing is, that morning, I had refused the muffin that was there right next to the coffee. I'd resisted the pastry. And let me tell you, when a warm pastry is sitting right there next to your coffee, that takes genuine effort, and I want full credit for it. As far as I was concerned, I'd done everything right. And yet, I was still drinking sugar first thing in the morning before I had even sat at my desk without knowing, without choosing it. And here's the thing that got me most. I wasn't just drinking sugar. I was drinking sugar in the drink that I had specifically engineered to avoid it. The effort I'd made, switching milks, giving up the syrup, skipping the pastry, was being quietly undone by an ingredient I had not known to look out for. Now, before we go any further, I want you to think of one food or drink in your life that you reach for specifically because you think it's the healthy choice. Just one. A sauce, a type of milk, a snack, maybe a product with a label that makes you feel good about buying it. Hold that thought, because by the end of today, you might see it very differently. This is episode 2 of my 4-part sugar series. Today, we talk about sneaky sugars. Today is an investigation episode. Let's go. Now, before we get into it, I want to personally welcome you to my podcast. I'm Vera Brown, weight loss, health, and fitness coach for women 40 and above who want to lose weight and transform their health naturally and sustainably. After struggling with my weight and health for decades in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur, I lost more than 100 pounds in my mid 40s and have kept it off. No pills, no injections, no procedures, no extremes, no tracking. In my podcast, I share what worked for me, including actionable strategies. I discuss fitness, nutrition, sleep, stress, and mindset to help you achieve your weight loss and health transformation goals. Join me. Now, let's get into it. Just a quick note before we dive into today's episode. If you have a medical condition connected to blood sugar, or your relationship with food is complicated in a clinical sense, please work with your healthcare team. This series that I'm doing on sugar is for the majority of us for whom sugar is simply a daily part of life that we want to understand better. And also, I'm not here to demonize any company or any industry. I'm here to give you knowledge and awareness so you can make your own choices. That is always the point. And before we dive in, if you haven't already downloaded my free sugar decoder guide, it's in the show notes. It's the companion resource to the sugar series. It stands completely on its own, but it also works beautifully alongside all 4 episodes. Completely free. Go and grab it. But first, let's get into the sneaky sugar. Now, let me start with the question underneath everything today. Why is sugar in savory foods in the first place? Genuinely, think about that for a moment. Because savory foods are not sweet. At least we don't interpret them that way. They may be bitter, they may be sour, but they are not sweet. They're savory. But here's the thing, once you understand why there are sugars in lots of savory foods, then you become a much more effective label reader and you start to know where to look before you even look. And you're much more knowledgeable and therefore much more powerful. So here's the thing, food manufacturers add sugar to savory foods for reasons that are honestly quite practical. Palatability is one. It literally, adding sugar to foods literally makes foods taste better. They're more craveable, they're more likely to bring you back to wanting more. Another reason is preservation. Sugar inhibits bacterial growth and extends shelf life. And of course, there's also flavor balance. In acidic foods, like tomato based sauces, sugar can soften the sharpness of those foods in ways that most human palates find them more pleasant. Now, look, none of these reasons are villainous, they are practical from a food manufacturing standpoint. But the result is that sugar is in places where you would never taste it, never expect it, and therefore never think to look for it. And here is a distinction that matters more than anything else in this episode. The sugar you choose intentionally, a beautiful dessert, piece of good chocolate, something you actually decided to have, that's one thing. That is a real choice made with full awareness. But the sugar that arrives without you knowing, that is the sugar that is quietly working against your health and weight loss goals without you ever having the chance to decide whether it was worth it. So, today we're going to talk about where that sneaky sugar arrives so you can decide. And that is the point. So, let's start by talking about food labels because this is where it gets genuinely interesting and honestly a little infuriating. Did you know that there are over 60 confirmed names for sugar on food labels? Seriously, 60. When I first found that out, I had to sit with that for a moment. 60 names for what is essentially one ingredient. And look, I'm not going to read you all 60. Don't panic. Nobody wants that, and you would have stopped listening by name 14. But what I want to give you are the tools to find sugar on any food label, regardless of what it is calling itself that particular day. But before I do, I want to ask you something. Think about the last food label that you actually read. What were you looking at? What were you focusing on? What were you noticing? Were you looking at the nutrition panel, the calories, the fat, the sugar total? Or were you reading the ingredients list? Because those are completely different data points. The nutritional panel tells you how much of certain things are in there. The ingredients list tells you what is actually in there, and the ingredients list is the one that tells the real full story. The rule that covers the most ground for what we're focusing on today is this. Any ingredient that you see on the ingredients list ending in the letters OSE, O's, is a form of sugar. So, for example, fructose, glucose, sucrose, dextrose, maltose, lactose, all of them. No exceptions I'm aware of. If it ends in those three letters, O's, it is a type of sugar. And here's the second thing worth knowing. Ingredients on food labels are listed by weight, heaviest first. But here's the tricky bit that's worth knowing. Some food manufacturers deliberately split sugar content across multiple different names on the ingredients label so that no single sugar appears high on the list. So instead of sugar being the second ingredient, because there's the most sugar in that product, you might see dextrose at position 7, fruit juice concentrate at position 9, and malt syrup at position 12. And the thing is, each one of those looks minor. So you think, yeah, yeah, it's okay, not a big deal. But actually, add them together, and that is the real significant sugar load of that food. And that's the tricky thing. When you see two or three different sugar names in one ingredient list or more, that splitting may have been intentional, and it's worth knowing that. So next time you're in a supermarket, next time you reach for something in your cupboard, in your pantry, in your fridge, pick up something that sounds wholesome and count how many different sugar names appear on the ingredients list. Just count them. I think the number might surprise you. Now, a handful of specific names worth knowing because those are the ones that are most likely to be hiding in foods you currently trust. Evaporated cane juice. Now, let's sit with that name for a second. Evaporated cane juice. To be honest, it almost sounds like it belongs on a farmer market shelf next to the handmade preserves. Yet, it's a type of sugar. It's extracted from sugar cane, the water's evaporated out, your body processes it as sugar. The name is simply more maybe appealing than literally the word sugar, and that is exactly why it gets used rather than calling it sugar. Another one that you'll see on food labels, fruit juice concentrate. And this one catches people out, myself included, because it sounds like fruit. And you think, oh, fruit's healthy. So surely fruit juice concentrate, how bad can that be? And the thing is that fruit juice concentrate did technically come from a fruit at some point, no doubt. But the process removes the water and the fiber, leaving behind concentrated fruit, sugar, with none of what makes whole fruit genuinely good for you. So when you see fruit juice concentrate in an ingredients list of a product, you are looking at free sugar. Free sugar in the way that we defined it in episode 1 of these series. Free sugar that happens to have had a past life as a piece of fruit. However, let's be clear. Currently, it is not fruit anymore, and it is absolutely free sugar that's processed in your body substantially the same way as normal white table sugar. Let's move on to another one because, again, that definitely catches people out, including myself. And it is something that you'll see in the health food stores, barley malt syrup. And very few people expect this one because, to be honest, it sounds like something in a craft beer. It sounds like a wholesome grain, yeah, barley. And that is part of why it gets used in cereals and breads and snack bars marketed as artisan or natural. But make no mistake, it is a sweetener. It is sugar. Now, the last one I want to go into is high fructose corn syrup. Look, there's no surprises here. Most of us know this one by now, surely. But here's the interesting thing about high fructose corn syrup food manufacturers know that we know. So, what does that mean? You will see high fructose corn syrup coming up less and less on food labels. And instead, you'll actually see it under slightly different names. You might see it as corn syrup or corn syrup solids or glucose syrup or glucose fructose syrup. Now, let's be clear here different name, but same substance. Because here's the thing the food industry knows that educated consumers avoid the one thing they recognize. And for us, a lot of that is the high fructose corn syrup. So that's one that definitely I've been caught up before. So I want to make sure you have the full information on it too. And the last one, actually, I am going to mention today is maltodextrin. And it doesn't have the O's name, and I'll tell you why. And that is what makes it even sneakier. And it is possibly the most counterintuitive of all of them because technically it's a starch, not a sugar. So it means that it doesn't even appear in the sugar total for a food label. So it's invisible in the sugar count. And yet, research indicates that the glycemic index of maltodextrin, the speed at which it raises your blood sugar, is actually higher than white table sugar. Can you imagine that? A substance that raises your blood sugar faster than white table sugar that doesn't actually count towards the sugar total on the label. I don't know about you, but I find that genuinely extraordinary. And I want you to find it extraordinary too. Now, look, I'm not going to spend the rest of the episode going ingredient by ingredient. The full list, all 60 plus names the sugar goes by on labels, organized by category, so you can actually use in the supermarket. That's all free in my free sugar decoder guide in the show notes. That guide exists precisely so you don't have to memorize all 60 names. You just need to have it with you when you shop. So go and download that after our episode. Right. Now, we get specific. These are the actual foods that I'm going to focus on today. And I really want to focus on the ones that will surprise you. That certainly surprised me and a lot of the women that I work with. And I'm going to start with the ones that really catch us out because we're just not expecting it. So let's first start with pasta sauces and tomato based sauces because sugar, in one way or another, is present in many of those. So, why is it even there in the first place? Well, it's to balance the natural acidity of tomatoes in a way that most of us find, frankly, tastier. So, what does that mean? It means that a jar of pasta sauce sitting next to your spaghetti on a weeknight can contain a meaningful amount of added sugar, even though you don't register it as something sweet. And I do mean a meaningful amount of added sugar, not a trace, a meaningful amount. And that's the thing, it doesn't taste sweet because the acidity of the tomatoes masks it entirely. So, let me ask you this. Do you check the label on your pasta sauce? If not, I want you to go and check it this week. Just look. You might be surprised. And also, I want to mention that if you buy the organic pasta sauce, the super high end farmer's market tomato based sauce, those, as much they might be tastier and more artisanal, they are not immune from this problem. Now, I want to tell you that I worked with a woman who discovered that the pasta sauce she'd been using literally every week for years, the one with the lovely old fashioned label suggesting that it had been made in someone's Italian grandmother's kitchen, it actually had sugar as the third ingredient, as it turned out. Not the sixth, the third. And she told me when I challenged her to go through some of her food products, she said, I felt almost personally betrayed by what I had believed about that pasta sauce. And the thing is, I completely understand that feeling because the label had told a story that it was artisanal and natural and authentic. And the label told a story that that woman believed. And the ingredients list told a completely different one. So, what are the results for that client? Well, she actually now makes her own, which is absolutely the best way if you can. She does 10 tomatoes, garlic, olive oil, basil, four ingredients, zero added sugar. She says it tastes better. I believe her. Now, let's move on to another category that catches many of us out: salad dressing. And all salad dressing can have this issue, but particularly the low fat versions. Because this is the thing when fat is removed from a food product, generally something has to replace the lost flavor and texture. And often that something is sugar in one way or another. And the irony here is that we use salad dressings for salads. And so many of us, myself included, have been in the salad brigade for years, eating salads, thinking that we were making the right choice. So the irony of making a healthy salad, or what we think is a healthy salad, and adding a dressing that has more sugar per tablespoon than a cookie, that irony is completely real. And it happens every single day to women who are genuinely trying. And let's move on to another category, which is particularly tricky again: bread. And before you say, yeah, I know, I'm not just talking about the soft, white supermarket bread, yeah? I am also talking about the brown bread, the granary bread, the multigrain bread, the bread that might say high fiber, might even say with added protein, might say artisan on the front. But the reality is that a large proportion of commercially produced bread actually contains added sugar in one way or another. And not for sweetness that you would necessarily taste, but for texture and shelf life, and actually the way that the crust of the bread browns. So, for bread without added sugar, look for one with 4 or 5 ingredients maximum: flour, water, yeast, salt. Literally, that's bread. Anything beyond that, start asking questions. And if you want to actually know my sourdough bread recipe, which I've gotten into that recently and I absolutely love it, let me know in the comments or send me an email. I am happy to share. Now, I want to tell you, or I need to tell you actually, about the chili sauce, because this is another one that you'll get lots of sugar without realizing it. And this is personal. Right. So in London, when I worked there was a specific Asian restaurant I absolutely love. And I'd been there numerous times for lunch, alone, with colleagues, all of it. I loved it. And every single time I added this specific chili sauce to my stir fry. Stir fry, by the way, which was tofu and vegetables, again, because I was genuinely trying. And that chili sauce was sriracha because I love the heat, I love the spice, and I genuinely, completely, probably a bit naively believed that this chili sauce was literally chili. Maybe some garlic, maybe a little vinegar, maybe some other spices. I don't know, but I thought that's that. That's where the story ends. It's savory, it's fiery, it is actually the opposite of sweet. And then one time, I when I'd started reading labels of products, I was sort of curious and I picked up the bottle and I flipped it around and there it was. Sugar was listed as the second ingredient. I gotta be honest, that absolutely shocked me because in turns out that in most commercial chili sauces and most sriracha sauces, there is sugar, significant amount, not a trace of sugar, not a small addition. In this case, it was literally the second ingredient after chilies. And I want to be honest with you with what happened next during that meal because I think you'll relate to this. I finished the meal. I didn't push the plate away in a pointed display of nutritional virtue. I'm not that person. Um, but I confess, and I say this with genuine affection for my own ridiculousness and humanity, I did not quite enjoy the sauce as much for the rest of that meal. Truly. because now I knew and I was really making the effort and I was kind of angry and annoyed. And knowing changed the experience for me slightly. And not in a useful way in that particular moment because I'd already put the chili sauce in my meal, but just in a I cannot unknow this now kind of way. But I'll tell you what did change was everything after that meal because from then on, I paid more attention to chili sauces. Of course, I read labels in the supermarket. I found one or two with no sugar. And also, I just started using fresh chilies or chili flakes, different pepper varieties, things where I knew exactly what was going in my food. But here is the thought that stayed with me from that sriracha chili sauce meal. If I was going to have sugar that day, and sometimes I absolutely choose to have sugar, I wouldn't have chosen to spend that sugar on a chili sauce. I would have chosen something else deliberately entirely. I would have chosen a beautiful dessert, a really good piece of chocolate, a gelato, something where the sweetness was the point and the pleasure was real. I wouldn't have chosen sugar that arrived uninvited through the back door of a chili sauce. So I'm curious, have you had your own version of the chili sauce moment? Because I want to hear about it. Come and connect with me and tell me what was your chili sauce moment? I'd love to know. Now, the next section is actually the one that I think might just land the hardest because everything we've talked about so far, the pasta sauce, the bread, maybe even the chili sauce, those are savory foods. And okay, you may not have expected sugar there, but you also probably wouldn't call them health foods either. But what I'm about to share in this section is different. These are foods with a health halo. Foods that you reach for specifically because you believe they are the right choice. Foods that feel virtuous. And look, I want to say something before we go any further. I've spent, over the years, a small fortune, genuinely a considerable amount of money over decades, in health food stores and in the organic sections of regular supermarkets. I know those aisles. I know the feeling of standing in front of beautifully designed products and paying the premium price happily because it felt like the right healthy thing to do. I was also vegan for a period of my life, and I was also vegetarian for years after that. So I'm not speaking from the outside looking in. I'm not on some high horse. I'm not on a pedestal. I lived in this space. I made these choices for exactly the same reasons you do. So I'm absolutely not here to shame or blame. What I am here to do is to give you the full picture because the health halo that we attribute to certain products is just not a guarantee. And some of these products are genuinely surprising. Right. Let's start with plant based milks. So let me come back to that story of the flat white and my morning coffee in London with the almond milk. Now, do you ever drink plant based milk? I'm curious because for a long time, I certainly did during my vegan and vegetarian years for sure. And if you do you check the label? I can't say I did. Be honest. I certainly didn't for a long time. Because the thing is, I switched to plant based milk as a health choice to avoid dairy. And it literally never occurred to me to question whether the carton of milk being poured into my morning flat white coffee might actually contain added sugar. Because why would it? I had specifically chosen a healthier milk. I had bought it from the health food store. It said organic and vegan on it for crying out loud. So, just to give you a heads up on this, oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, rice milk, the rule here is this: unless the label specifically says unsweetened and always check the back ingredients list, the reality is that actually many commercial versions of plant milks contain added sugar. It's surprising, isn't it? I know this is the one that really catches out so many of us. Oat milk, in particular, can have a notably higher sugar content, even in versions that don't taste notably sweet, partly because of the enzymatic process used to make it, which breaks down oat starches into simple sugars. So always look for the unsweetened version of plant based milks. They do exist once you know what to look for. But can I ask you, did you know that? Did you know that actually so many plant based milks automatically have some sugar added in? Because I genuinely didn't. And literally, I was vegan or vegetarian for about 7 years total. So it wasn't just a 2 month experiment, it was a lifestyle commitment. And I didn't know that for a long time. I'm now omnivore, but I am much more aware of what I eat and drink. And now, if I do want plant based milks, I certainly make the effort to buy the unsweetened versions consistently. And to be honest, even when I add them to my coffee, it tastes the same. Now, let's move on to another category that can have this health halo effect that is absolutely undeserved. Protein bars. Oh, yes, protein bars. And health snack bars. Look, if you have one of these anywhere near you right now, here's my challenge to you. In your bag, in your desk drawer, in your kitchen, in your car, would you do me a favor? I want you to actually go and get it right now. And turn around and look at the ingredients list, not the protein count on the front, not what it tells you about high protein and natural or anything like that, not the calorie number. Look at the ingredients list because the reality is the many protein bars or healthy, so called healthy snack bars, granola bars, are essentially confectionery bars wearing gym clothing. So, sugar, in one of its several aliases and different names, might just be sitting there in the first three or four ingredients. So, what's my advice here? Check before you assume. And if it looks like a sweet bar and you want it, great, no problem. Have it as a treat, but enjoy it as a treat because your brain registers those two things differently, and that registration matters. Note that it's a treat and not something healthy because that is the point. Now, the next category I want to highlight, because absolutely I've been cut up by this for years, and you might have been too, is granola and muesli. Now, look, I'm not demonizing whole food categories. Again, I'm not telling you that you should never have any of these things, but I am just saying that a lot of them don't deserve the health halo, particularly when it comes to sugar. So it's worth having a look and making that decision for yourself. So the reality is, granola absolutely has one of the most powerful health reputations in the breakfast category. You know, the oats, the steel cut rolled oats, and the nuts and the seeds. And in many granolas, those are genuinely nutritious. No problem. But many commercial versions of granola also contain significant added sugar, whether that's in sweetened coatings or syrups or honey drizzles, maybe even dried fruit with concentrated sugar binding everything together. And the thing is that a lot of what fills the granola section at a supermarket is worth reading carefully before you assume. Same thing with muesli. Now, the next category I absolutely want to talk about is one that really gets under my skin and I find particularly frustrating. It's certainly one that's caught me out personally more than once. And the women I work with are consistently surprised. So I absolutely want to make sure we talk about it. It's the category of pre marinated and pre flavored proteins. Now, Before you dismiss me, I am not talking about man made proteins. No, I am talking about literally chicken breasts, salmon, anything like that, that we choose. And here's the irony, because it's protein, because it's chicken breast, it's seafood. These are all healthy things. But the convenience factor sometimes overrides the health concerns. So, oftentimes, I've done this before. You pick up the pre marinated, the pre flavored chicken breast, and you think, fantastic, it's that much faster to eat a delicious, healthy meal. And these convenience proteins are often in the fresh meat and fish section of the supermarket. They come already seasoned, already marinated, already flavored, ready to go straight in the oven. Fantastic. You think you're buying chicken, you think you're buying salmon, protein, white meat, fish, things that are generally excellent for you. But here is what I want you to ask next time you reach for one of those. What exactly is in the marinade? So I want to tell you a story here just to make this really personal because, again, it's happened to me more than once. I came home after a supermarket trip with an herby chicken breast one evening. And by the way, it was skinless. Yeah, because skin's fat, it was during those days. Skinless white chicken breast that was labeled as herby. I forget what the details were, but as far as I was concerned, I was buying lean white meat protein. Fantastic. This is obviously after my vegan and vegetarian years. So I picked it up, to be honest, specifically because it was convenient and because I wanted something quick and healthy when we got home. And again, it said herby on the label. And I think on the front, if I remember correctly, there was a little visual of rosemary and sage. And frankly, it looked exactly like the type of thing that is simple and wholesome protein, and you'd feel good about putting in the oven and eating it. And then I got it home, and just out of habit, I suppose, at that point, I turned it over and read the ingredients. And incredibly annoyingly, alongside the rosemary and the sage, there was sugar. It wasn't called sugar, but it had that OSE ending that I told you about. O's. Sugar in my chicken breast. And I was so incredibly annoyed because this plain, ordinary, good for you white meat actually had sugar added to the marinade. And I was so annoyed, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, frankly, almost resigned kind of way because I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to do the healthy thing, and I still got caught out, which is the specific frustration that I think many of you will recognize. Another example is the barbecue flavored salmon, the teriyaki chicken thighs, the honey and mustard chicken. These are maybe a bit more obvious because the name itself is a signal. But even the ones that sound simple, herby, herbed, lemon and herb, rosemary, garlic, those type of things, they are worth checking. Because oftentimes a marinade actually contains more than just herbs and spices, and sugar, in one way or another, is absolutely frequently used to help the marinade adhere to the protein, also to aid the browning of it once it's cooked, and to balance the sharpness of the acidic ingredients like lemon or vinegar. So, the fix here is simple. It takes about 90 seconds. Buy the plain protein and add your own seasoning. I know, I know, it's annoying. I know the whole point of buying these things is that they're convenient and save you time. But when through that convenience, you end up eating sugar that you didn't intend to eat, that is a question about how you value your time and your health. So if you have a piece of plain salmon, you can add olive oil, lemon, or whatever herbs you have in the kitchen. That is genuinely better. You know exactly what it is. It's no harder to cook. Okay, with a few extra minutes to marinate or put some herbs on it, it costs less generally, but you have to know what's in your food to make that choice. And now you do. And just while we're here in this territory of foods that might feel completely virtuous, I want to tell you about peanut butter. Now, look, like so many other categories that we're talking about today, I'm not talking about all peanut butter. I'm not talking about all nut butters. Plain peanut butter, the kind where the only ingredient is literally peanuts, maybe a pinch of salt, that I think is genuinely excellent. There's good fats, protein, real food value, nothing to worry about within a healthy diet. But I picked up a jar once, again from the organic section specifically. I went out of my way for this one. It was labeled as organic, it was labeled as vegan, and here's the third one, the label also said no palm oil, which I was actively looking for. I checked all the things at the front of the packet of the peanut butter. I ticked every box, and I felt quietly excellent and really good about my peanut butter choice. And certainly the price tag that I was about to pay reflected that. And then again, just out of habit, because at that point I'd started to really read ingredient lists, I turned the peanut butter jar around, and there was sugar in the ingredient list. Much to my shock, and my carefully, specifically, deliberately chosen organic, vegan, no palm oil peanut butter. And I don't know if you've ever felt that, but the specific frustration of that moment, having checked all the things that mattered to me on the front of the packet and still missing the one thing on the back, I think that feeling is something that a lot of you will understand completely because you are trying. We're trying. You're paying attention. You're spending more money for the healthier, better option. And yet, the better, healthier option still quietly slipped something in that you didn't want to have. So, again, plain peanut butter or nut butters with just one ingredient, literally the nut, is available. That exists. But the key is to look at the ingredient list rather than assuming that anything labeled as healthy or protein or organic or vegan or no palm oil at the front doesn't necessarily mean no added sugar on the back. And this is the lesson that I think runs through every single example in today's episode. The front of the packet is marketing. The back of the packet is truth, or at least as close as we can get to it. So, if I can just give you one piece of advice today, is always read the back. So, let me tell you about another woman I worked with because I think her story might resonate with you. She came to me convinced that she had a pretty clean diet. And she was generally making efforts, avoiding the obvious sugar, choosing what she thought were the healthier options, reading labels, but looking at the front of the packet and the nutrition panel rather than the actual ingredients list. So, one of the exercises that we had together is that we went through the specific products that she used most regularly as part of her meals in her kitchen. And to be honest, that exercise was as educational for her as it was for me because she was visibly shocked. There was added sugar in one way or another, sugar that she never intended to have in her plant based milk, her protein bars, her granola, her organic pasta sauce, her organic artisanal salad dressing. Every single one had sugar one way or another. And this is the thing. It wasn't because she was careless. It's because she trusted the front of the packet. And the front of the packet had not told the full story. And her first reaction We went through that exercise, and I'm telling you this because it matters. It actually wasn't shame, and it should never be shame. If you know anything about my philosophy, I believe no shame, no judgment, just real strategies that work. But her reaction when we discovered this together as we went on our investigation of what she was eating was actually a relief because suddenly the thing that felt like a personal mystery to her, the question that she had, why am I not making more progress on my weight loss when I'm doing everything right? Finally, there was a bit of an explanation because she hadn't been doing everything wrong, far from it, but she'd been missing a piece of information. And now she had it. And now she could choose differently. Now, the next section I want to talk about because I think it's really underestimated in the sneaky food conversation and the sneaky sugar conversation. And particularly because, again, it falls under that health halo. And it's something that I absolutely love and therefore have eaten for many years, and have been caught out by sneaky sugar multiple times. So I want to help you avoid that pain. What am I talking about? Fermented foods. Okay. Now, again, I love fermented foods. They can be a nutritional powerhouse, and they have had a significant moment in the wellness and health conversation over the last few years. Rightly so, I should say. Gut health and the health of your microbiome, we'll do future episodes on that, is absolutely one of the most actively researched areas in nutrition right now. And the findings are genuinely exciting. A healthy, diverse gut microbiome, which is the community of bacteria and other microorganisms that live in your digestive system, that appears to play a meaningful role in everything from immunity to metabolism to mood. And fermented foods specifically are absolutely one of the ways we can support that community. Fabulous. Everybody's on board so far. So, what is the advice? The advice is eat more fermented foods. So, we're buying the kimchi, which by the way I love, which is basically a spicy Korean sauerkraut in different shapes. We're buying the sauerkraut. We're buying kefir, the kombucha, the pickles. We're reaching for the sour, tangy, fermented things with real enthusiasm and real health intention. Again, reaching for fermented foods because of the health halo. And I'm completely supportive of that because the research on fermented foods and gut health is real and growing. But here's where the sneaky sugar problem arrives. And it arrives in two separate ways, and both are worth understanding. So, and again, I'm very passionate about this because I love fermented foods. I literally eat fermented foods multiple times a week. The first thing that people do not know is that pickled doesn't actually mean fermented. I know that casually and commonly, many of us use it to means the same thing, but it doesn't actually mean the same thing at all. These are two completely different processes. The traditional fermentation uses live bacteria to convert sugars of the foods into acids. And that is what produces the tangy flavor that you associate with kimchi or real sauerkraut. And that process is what also creates the live cultures that make fermented foods beneficial to gut health. However, commercial pickling typically works completely differently. Most commercial pickles are actually preserved in vinegar, not through fermentation, but through acid that is added to the product. So, what does that mean in practical terms? That means the vinegar pickling gives you the same or similar, I should say, sour flavor, but generally none of the live cultures or the probiotic effect of real fermented foods. And Commercial pickled vegetables, commercial actual pickles, they very often contain added sugar. Why? Well, again, because it's the added sugar that helps balance that tanginess and that acidity profile in terms of flavor. So the thing is, I've had many of these frustrating experiences. I've eaten pickles in one way or another since a teenage. I love pickles, I love sour things. And I had one of those moments with a jar of pickles that I'd been buying for years without a second thought. And to be honest, when the whole conversation about fermented foods and sour preserved foods started, I thought, "Ooh, great. That's exactly what I'm having with these pickles. They're sour, they're vinegary, they're sharp. Fantastic. It's exactly the kind of thing that is obviously acid and brine and not sweetness. Fabulous. I'm safe. I'm doing the healthy thing." And then one day, I flipped it around, again, out of habit at that point that I was growing, and there was sugar. In this case, it wasn't even labeled as anything else. It was literally just called sugar in my pickles. And here is the slightly eerie part. Once I knew it was there, and you might relate to this, I could taste a faint sweetness in those pickles that I'd never noticed before. But the thing is, it'd been there the whole time. I just not known to taste it. But I want to challenge you. Did you know that? Did you know that pickled and fermented are absolutely not the same thing? And that more often than not, pickled means there's sugar. Because when I share this with the women I work with, their reaction is almost always the same. It's usually literally this: "Wait, what?" Maybe that's what you're thinking too, because even from women who consider themselves very label aware, they are caught out. I was too. Now, here's a second thing, and I do want you to stay around for this because this is the key one that gets even more sinister in some ways when it comes to fermented foods. Here's the shocker: even genuinely fermented foods can contain added sugar. Those same sauerkraut, that same kimchi, products that you might reasonably assume that the ingredients are just vegetable, salt, and life cultures, because that is how you ferment something. Actually, some of them still have sugar. Some of the commercial versions of those products have sugar. Why? It's the same thing to improve the flavor and actually to speed up the fermentation process, or simply because a slightly sweeter version tasted better, or maybe even to preserve shelf life. Now, look, not all brands, but enough that the label is still worth reading, even on the products you feel most confident about. I've been caught out by this. So, look, I don't want to fill you with fear, but here is the practical point I really want you to hold from this whole section because it applies to every sour, savory, sharp, or bitter food in this category. The taste of the food is not the guide. What you're noticing with your taste buds is not the truth. The label, and particularly the ingredients list in the back, is the guide. Always. Because just because something tastes nothing like sugar doesn't mean that sugar isn't in there because your mouth cannot detect maltodextrin. It can't detect sugar in a tangy marinade or a sharp pickle brine or a spicy chili sauce. The only thing that can detect those ingredients is your eyes on the label. So, my practical suggestion, particularly for this category of pickled and fermented foods, is look for products where the only ingredients are vegetables, salt, and possibly live cultures or vinegar. Full stop. No sugar, no syrup, no concentrate. Those products exist, but you'd be surprised that they're actually harder to find. And the other option, and I generally want to mention this because It's been one of the more surprising and enjoyable parts of my own health journey is to actually make your own. No, I'm not joking here. I've started fermenting vegetables at home. I have my own version of kimchi, which I'm sure is incredibly inauthentic, but I love it. My own sauerkraut, my own fermented vegetables. And look, it's generally simpler than I expected. Literally vegetable, salt, clean jar, and some thyme. That is pretty much it. And you know exactly what's in it because you put exactly what's in it. And I gotta be honest, there's something quite satisfying about opening a jar of something you made yourself, knowing precisely what's inside. Now, I will take the caveat that I completely understand that home fermenting, it can be a bit of a smelly process and it's not realistic for every life and every schedule. Of course, that's absolutely fine. But the takeaway is simply this: even if something is sour, savory, sharp, or bitter, even if it tastes nothing like sugar, that doesn't mean that sugar isn't there. So always check. Now, one more category that I want to highlight here before we close: drinks that wear a bit of a health halo costume. Specifically, because this is actually where that sneaky sugar problem is arguably the most concentrated per serving. So, I want to highlight here something that you see online all the time: kombucha. Now, look, it has a genuinely good reputation. It's a fermented drink full of supposed probiotics, the kind of thing you buy from the fridge in a health food store feeling rather good about yourself. And the base drink does contain live cultures, and the fermentation process does consume some of the original sugar. But many commercial kombuchas have sugar added after fermentation to replace what was consumed and improve the flavor. So, a good kombucha can have relatively modest sugar. However, some commercial versions have considerably more. Again, the lesson always is read the label. I want to focus on another category of drinks here: cold pressed juices and smoothies. Let's be honest here. The marketing for this category of drinks is extraordinarily effective. The cold press process, the raw ingredients, the natural colors, the story of goodness. And yet, let's just not forget that a single bottle of cold pressed juice can contain the equivalent sugar of 4 to 5 pieces of whole fruit, but delivered without the fiber that would normally slow down the absorption of the sugar. So, a lot of sugar, very little satiety, and a premium price tag. I would argue that the whole fruit is actually genuinely better. Not because juice is evil, no, but because the whole fruit is a different thing entirely. I also want to highlight here flavored waters and sports drinks. And this is also something I feel quite passionate about as somebody who used to be quite a high level tennis player and used to drink a lot of sports drinks, thinking that it was necessary for my hydration and health. Some of those contain significant amounts of sugar. Again, they may not be called sugar on the label, but they do. Some others contain sweeteners instead, artificial sweeteners. I'm going to address that later, but the ones marketed as natural flavor and no artificial ingredients, even those can still be sweetened with fruit juice concentrate or other free sugars that, frankly, are just as real as the table sugar you're trying to avoid. So, I'm not saying to never have these drinks. But I am saying have them with the awareness that they contain sugar and treat them as such. Don't give them a free pass as a health food because I would argue they're not. So the rule I use is this: if it tastes sweet and if it's not whole fruit or water, check the label before you assume it's a free pass. That's it. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. It's exhausting. I get it. Um, it can be. But you're probably thinking if sugar is hiding everywhere, in the chili sauce and the granola and the kombucha and the pasta sauce and the chicken breast, what about those sweeteners? The artificial sweeteners, the natural alternative sweeteners, are they the answer? And that is genuinely a good question. And the honest answer is that it is considerably more complicated than you might expect. There is real and developing research here that deserves a proper, full, dedicated conversation rather than just a few rushed paragraphs at the end of an episode that's already covering a lot of ground. So I'm going to give sweeteners their own episode in the future. They deserve it. But for now, I will simply say sugar free on the front of a packet doesn't automatically mean better. And I'll leave it there until we can have that discussion properly. Now, just to remind you, everything we've talked about today, the 60 plus names that sugar goes by, the split sugar trick on ingredients list, the specific foods to be aware of, all of that is in my free sugar decoder guide in the show notes. It's all organized so you can actually take it to the supermarket, use it. The link is there. It's free. Go and download it today if you haven't already. And before I give you your action for this week, I want to say something about why I'm even sharing all of this, just because I want to make sure that we're on the same page. It is not to make you afraid of food. It is not to send you into the supermarket with a spirit of grim suspicion about everything on the shelf. No, that is not a joyful way to live, and that is not what I want for you. What I do want for you is the foundation of what I teach in my standards over rules method, the foundation of everything I do and everything I share. It's not rules that someone else made up and is applying to your life. No, it's you setting your own standards built from genuine understanding, applied on your own terms in a way that actually fit your life. But the thing is, you can't build your own health standards about something you don't fully understand. And that is why this episode exists. That's why I'm doing this whole 4-part sugar series, not to restrict you, but to inform you. Because informed choices are completely different from restricted ones. Informed feels like freedom, restricted feels like a cage. One of them lasts and one of them doesn't. Now, you know where some of the sneaky sugar is, and you can decide what it means for you. So, your action from today, and this is different from the kitchen audit we talked about in episode 1 of my sugar series. This one today is more specific. This week, I want you to pick one product you use regularly. Something you feel fairly confident about, something that you would genuinely call a healthy choice, or at least a neutral one. And I want you to actually take the time to look at the ingredients list on the back, not the nutrition panel, not the labeling on the front, the ingredients list. And count how many different forms of sugar you can find. Use the O's rule. Look for those 3 letters, OSE. Look for the word syrup, look for concentrate, look for juice, look for evaporated cane sugar, maltodextrin. And if you find 2 or 3 different names on one ingredient list, remember what we talked about. That splitting is not accidental. It may be deliberate. Just one product. Just look. You're gathering information, you're building the lens. And kind of tell me what you find. Tell me the thing that surprised you the most because I have a feeling it is going to be something that you might have been buying for years without a second thought. And I want to say something about working with me because what we've been talking about today, the sneaky sugars, the health halo foods, the chicken breast you brought home thinking it was just chicken and some herbs. This is exactly the kind of thing that shows up as a blind spot for so many of the women I work with one to one. And here's the thing about blind spots. By definition, you cannot see them, but they absolutely sabotage your weight loss and health goals. You can know everything we talked about today and still have a specific pattern, a specific product, a specific habit that is quietly working against your goals. One that you cannot simply see from the inside. That is not failure of intelligence, that is not a lack of effort. It is just how it works. Because the reality is, we are all too close to our own lives to see all of it clearly. And what I do in my VIP coaching session is I look at your specific situation with fresh eyes, your food, your patterns, your history, your life. And together, we identify the specific things that are quietly working against you. Not a generic plan, a real personal conversation that produces a real personal roadmap built entirely around you. And if that sounds like what you need, the details are in the show notes of how to book your session with me. Now, before I let you go, I want to tell you about rice cakes. And we'll go deep on rice cakes in episode 3 of my sugar series, I promise. Because for years, I ate rice cakes. They were the healthy option at my desk in my corporate job while everyone else in the office reached for the biscuits and the pastries and the cookies. I ate the rice cakes. And there was a particular kind of quiet, almost self congratulatory suffering involved in eating a rice cake at work. And if you've ever had a rice cake, no disrespect to rice cake, but you know what I'm talking about. A rice cake announces I am being responsible. I'm making a sensible choice. And I may not be the most flavorful and the most joyful of foods, but I am the healthy option. And I accepted that small daily indignity of eating a rice cake rather than the cookie or the pastry because I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing for my health. And then I actually found out as I moved forward with my health journey what rice cakes actually do in your body. I'm going to save that for episode 3 of my 4-part sugar series because it deserves its full moment. But I will tell you this much. The embarrassment of eating rice cakes when everybody else was enjoying the pastries, as it turns out, was only half the story. And episode 3 is the conversation that I think more of us need to be having. It's about foods that are not sugar, have no added sugar on the label, that would never appear on any list of culprits, and yet behave like sugar in your body. That episode, I think, is going to change how you see an entire category of food you probably eat every day. Again, not to demonize it, not to avoid it, not to restrict it, but to give you the information. But before we get there, try the label challenge this week that I told you about. Pick one product, turn it around, let yourself be informed, and read the ingredient list because informed is always better than not. Thank you for being here today. I hope you find it useful. And one last thing, if cravings are something that gets in your way, and certainly from the women that I work with, it is one of the most common and frustrating parts of a true health transformation, I've been building something specifically for those moments. A craving tool to provide you with real practical support for the actual moments where the craving hits. The wait list is open right now. Go sign up in the show notes so you know when it launches. And before you go, would you do me a favor, please? If this episode helped you, would you share it with a woman in your life who is struggling with sugar? Don't forget to get your sugar decoder guide. Free, link is in the show notes. If you're enjoying the show, a review on podcast takes less than 2 minutes and would mean the world to me. It really helps other women find my show. Every single review matters more than you think, and I'd be eternally grateful. And thank you for taking this time today and joining me for today's episode. If you want more real, honest guidance on losing weight and transforming your health sustainably in midlife and beyond, you are absolutely in the right place. Subscribe here, get my strategies, mindset shifts, and the tools that actually work for women 40 and above. No BS, no quick fixes, just real transformation. Don't forget, you deserve to feel good in your body and life. I believe in you and I'm cheering you on every single step of the way. For the obligatory legal disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, nutritionist, therapist, medical professional, or similar. All information shared on this podcast is purely for informational purposes and does not constitute medical advice. It is entirely your personal choice and responsibility as to what information you use. Please consult your own medical professional for any medical advice.